Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the regular council meeting of March 22nd to call to order. A recommendation to get a motion to suspend the regular meeting for the committee of the whole to be convened.
So moved.
Moved by Barry, second by
I'll move that, Wade.
Okay, moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Randalla. Call the question. Everyone, okay. I guess I have to figure out how to do this. Lee is with the Zoom. It's is there anybody object? So I will go with that one.
Yeah.
Does anyone oppose?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I will find the agenda here for the committee of the whole meeting. Sorry. Okay, here we go. For the committee of the whole meeting of council to be held on March 22nd at 7 p.m. 2021. The committee of the whole is proceeding in an adjusted format to abide by ministerial orders and physical distancing guidelines. Those wishing to ask a question of council are invited to do so in the following manner: by email to the corporate administrator at rosa.miller@princesrupert.ca, or by leaving a voicemail at 627-0963. In accordance with Council Procedure Bylaw number 3092-2000, any person wishing to present to council must provide their request in writing at least 7 days before the date of the meeting to the corporate administrator. Physical attendance in council chambers is not currently permitted due to COVID-19 protocols and provincial health orders. So I'd like to call this meeting to order. The recommendation is to adopt the agenda of the committee of the whole meeting of March 22nd, 2021 be adopted as circulated. Mover? Councillor Randalla, mover, and Councillor Skelton Morgan, seconder. All those in favor, or sorry, all those opposed. Okay, I guess because we can see each other now, which way should I do this? Sorry, I'm going to ask the question right now. Being that everyone is visible, Zoom, I'm going to ask that everyone raise their hands if they're for and against, to not raise their hands, just because this is only our second Zoom meeting. So, did we vote on that one? Yes, we did. No, we didn't vote on that. Okay, I'd like to vote on that one then. So who is for? Okay. Well, okay, unanimous. Okay, number 3, delegation. We have EcoTrust Canada here to speak to us. So go ahead, whoever is speaking on behalf.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I'm gonna wait. I think Rosa's got a presentation for us to screen there. Awesome. Great, thank you so much, Rosa. Hi, everyone. My name's Alexi Stevens, and I'm the program manager of the Skeena region for EcoTrust Canada. And I'll just let my colleague Charles introduce himself. Charles, were you able to jump in there?
Hello, I'm Charles Guerin, Food Systems Coordinator with EcoTrust Canada. Thank you for seeing us tonight.
Awesome. So I've been looking forward to giving you folks a presentation about what we plan to do with some grant money that we were able to access with the city's support. And that's from the Northern Development Initiative Trust, the Special Initiatives Fund. And so I'll just kind of go in, just start from the beginning here. So yeah, we're starting a Cane Island urban demonstration farm with the money that we received from Northern Development Initiative Trust. I'll go to the next slide, please, Rosa. First, we'll just give a little bit about EcoTrust Canada. Of course, if you don't know already, we are an enterprising charity that works with rural, remote, and Indigenous communities, and we are working towards building an economy that provides a healthy and resilient natural environment, sustainable and an abundant energy, food, and housing, prosperous and meaningful livelihoods, and a vibrant and inclusive cultures. And we call this approach building an economy that provides for life. And our on-the-ground work and systems approach is entrepreneurial, partnership-based, and relentlessly practical. We'll just go to the next slide, please. Our main work in Prince Rupert for EcoTrust Canada that you may know of from the past is our community fisheries work, and that's with electronic monitoring that we do through with the Area A crab fleet, and then other observer work for the fisheries as well, some fisheries policy work on the federal and the provincial level. And then, of course, you may have be familiar with the North Coast Innovation Lab, which was a 3-year project from 2017, and it just wrapped up in 2020 at the end of last year. And during that project, we had a number of different themes in mind for what we wanted to accomplish, and it was really mainly a economic development and cultural or community development kind of initiative. And the projects that we did in the past were around entrepreneurship, food security, and various other things, arts and culture, building co-working and information sharing spaces, that kind of thing. And we found the projects that really resonated a lot with the community and that we had a lot of success with were the projects that we focused in on food security. So with that in mind, we decided to, with the ending of the North Coast Innovation Lab, we decided, hey, there's something in this food security stuff. This stuff really resonates with our community. Why don't we focus solely on food security? And from that was born the Northwest Food Systems Initiative. Next slide, please, Rosa. So in the past, we've done various food security projects. We've worked with Coastal Shellfish Corporation to develop restorative ocean farming practices, which is farming a method of aquaculture, which uses the entire water column vertically to grow different species. We've partnered with Gitmak-Makai-Nishka Society to grow food in a vacant greenhouse a couple summers ago. Just kind of wanting to just back up a bit and go, what is food security and what does that mean to us for our initiative? And it can mean a lot of different things to various people, but the definition that really resonates for us is that food security exists when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy lifestyle. And given our context here in Prince Rupert with Indigenous community, Indigenous nations within our community, this food security definition also needs to include cultural and traditional foods as well. And so if you think about how does that definition play out in our community, do people all have access, physically and economically to enough food, sufficient food, safe, nutritious, and culturally appropriate food for them? So just wanted to just give you a moment just to think about that and how that could play out in our community with this definition of food security. And then I'll go to the next slide and pass it off to Charles.
Thank you, Lexi. So we are in the beginning stages of construction on our urban farm in downtown Prince Rupert. This will be on 2nd Avenue. Our lot is approximately 100 feet by 35 feet. That'll be secured with a fence, and then we are going to build several structures on there, such as a greenhouse, raised beds, low polytunnel. We're going to have a sheltered deck for a presentation area, as well as a kind of a common area for people to gather and talk and just generally kind of converse around growing food. So the purpose of our initiative here is to really demonstrate what people can be doing in their own yards, in their own gardens at home. So we're really going to break down barriers as to what can be done in the Pacific Northwest. We're going to be showing how a greenhouse can be used to grow food in your own space. We're going to be pursuing this so that people can source their food locally and shorten supply chains. So we're going to be doing this with partnerships through the Gitmac McKay Nishka Society. We're going to do this with Metlakatla Stewardship Society and Hecate Strait as well. We're going to start studies around composting. We're going to be connecting local food businesses. And we're going to gather, we're going to start a seed saving network. Would you mind skipping to the next slide, Rosa, please? So we're going to have a network of workshops. So we're going to engage community members to show how growing can be done in Prince Rupert. We're going to bring back traditional food practices such as preservation, foraging. We're going to have a display bed in our garden, which is going to show a diverse array of plants, heirloom plants that people can be growing. We're going to highlight diversity in gardens so that people can see the type of plants that can be grown in Prince Rupert to combat the notion against the idea that food is hard to grow in this rainy climate. So through the use of a greenhouse, low polytunnel, and various other methods, we're going to show the type of growing that can be done. So we'll be connecting businesses that are producing food waste to start a composting program. That'll be a study with the students that we have. So we've already started with the brewery. We have our permaculture expert, Ken Shaw, starting a compost for us, which has been begun about 3 to 4 months ago, and it's ready for us now. So he's been accepting spent grain from the brewery and combining it with wood shavings from various sources as well from the community to start our compost. But then we're also going to connect various community members, community businesses that are producing organic waste, and we're going to turn that into compost to see us through the year. And then hopefully we can start a program where people can be separating their organic waste in their own kitchens, bringing it to us or to Ken or to the proper source, and then we can turn that into compost, which we can share within the community. So it's just a really good way to stop entering organic matter into the landfill, and then also putting use to organic waste that every home in our community is producing.
And if I could just jump for a moment.
Yes, please.
Well, with the harvest of the urban demonstration farm, for the first year, that's all going to be donated through existing distribution networks, Gitlax Moon, Keen Island Anti-Poverty Society, the Transition House, to people in need in our community who don't have access to fresh and local food. If you think about trying to get local food, you think about, okay, I need a car, I need to go to Terrace on a farmer's market day, and then get the food from there and bring it back here. There's not that many options that are accessible. And so that's another large piece of this urban farm, is not just teaching people how to grow, but making it accessible to people and lowering the barriers. We really want to, in mind with partnering with various organizations, we really want to make sure this space is inclusive and welcoming to all people, and that everyone who wants to can see themselves getting involved in some way or another learning something. And what better way to connect community members than through such a common theme as food and eating and enjoying food together. I'll just pass it back to Charles.
So for that purpose, we will bring in a student who will conduct interviews and study through the community to identify potential food insecure groups, and then we'll determine the best possible avenues for our produce in the first year. So as Lucky said, the food will be donated from all the first year's production, and then for the following year, we'll form a business plan that will allow us to continue our initiative forwards, where we'll produce food for sale and as well as for donation. And then this will be economically feasible for years going forward. And that'll allow us to take the initiative further. And then once we've established this infrastructure, we will start the bones of a food distribution network, which we will connect food producers in the Prince Rupert itself, as well as the outlying areas in near Terrace, the farms there, so we can bring some of the bounty of our growing and our wild harvest and take that inland while connecting with food producers there and bringing back food from the inland, so that we're efficiently using distribution networks to not have empty trucks on the road, and also shortening supply chains from the southern reaches of the province. Next slide, please, Rosa.
Does anyone have any questions for Charles or I about the urban farm and what we're trying to get at here with it?
It's Barry Cunningham here. I think it's a great idea. I really like it. How are you going to be receiving the organic waste from the residents of Prince Rupert is my first question.
So we're going to have a site set aside. We're still studying where that's going to be. One of our students' main objectives is going to be a composting program. And they are going to perform a study to show the viability of accepting that waste, educating people on how to separate the proper material from their own kitchens, and then where the best place to actually turn that into the compost might be. So that's to be determined.
Okay, and my second question is, how long do you propose this project to go on? Is it hopefully going to be something permanent, or are you looking at short-term, long-term, things like that?
So ideally, we would love to see this be a 5-year project, or even longer than that. We are funding for the first year with pursuing funding for the second year as well. We're finalizing a lease for the first year, and then we will get that extended to the second year. And then hopefully we'll continue on. We'll pursue every avenue to continue that to a minimum of 5 years.
Okay, and who's going to actually be doing the gardening and that? Are you going to hire people, or are you going to have programs through the schools, things like this?
Yes, we're engaging many community members and groups. Myself is going to be the main person in charge of the gardening, and then I'll be working with Ken Shaw, who is kindly offering his time and efforts to assist with that. And then we're going to engage with student groups, and then various groups for volunteer efforts. And then we're going to just diversify and bring people, every group we can, who wants to be interested in this project, and bring them into our farm and engage them in workshops and growing.
Okay, Charles, right now you've got a couple, maybe 2, possibly 3 community gardens around town. Are you going to be networking with them at all, or just going to be on your own?
Yes, we are going to be networking. We have been looking at the Caps Garden down off McKay Street, and we're looking to expand that area and bring interest to that area, because it's not fully engaged at the moment, to my understanding. So we're going to try to bring that into the fold, and then we're engaging with the Prince Rupert Garden Club as well to gain their knowledge and put on some workshops, and we really want to bring them in so that they can show us the nuances of growing in this climate.
Okay, great. Like I say, I really like the idea. I think it's a step in the right step forward. So good luck.
Thank you.
I'll jump in there next. Rosa, can I just get you to switch back to the screen? Thank you, so I can see everyone. I just want to say thank you for your presentation. It's always good to get a little bit of information before, if anyone looks ahead at the agenda tonight. We're obviously dealing with a temporary use permit to make this happen. And look at
I think you're seeing the table. Yeah.
I better switch my camera around here. Okay, there we go. I was wondering why you were laughing. So I just wanted to, once again, obviously you heard what I said. Thank you. And, we'll be looking forward to a temporary use permit discussion later on this. And is there anyone else that had anything that they wanted to ask? Okay, we'll go with Councillor Skelton Morvan and then Councillor Randawa.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation, and I'm super, super excited about this initiative. I think for me, with having some of these conversations back when the NCIL was still around, I think that, so getting these things now in motion now lays the framework for some larger scale initiatives and some commercial operations, much like what the Gitmuck Mackay are doing. I think there's a huge need for that in northern BC, and I think that laying those kind of stepping stones and groundwork over time is going to be with proof of concept. And I think getting folks involved in these types of topics, when we look at some of the global resource kind of expenditure and what that looked like, even just back in 2018, where the HSBC Bank did a report and showing that, allocation for resources when it came to food, for the next year, there was already 7 months into the next year when it came to resource expenditure. So for us, that in itself should be a huge red flag for food crisis and the future of food crisis for North America, let alone other countries. And I think for us to be ahead of that curve is really, really important. And I just want to thank the both of you for the work that you're doing. And it's really, really important. And thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for your presentation, and it's a great idea. And I think our community will get a lot of benefit from this project. Looking forward for big success for this one. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Adie.
I'll just unmute myself. A couple of questions about it. Conceptually, I'm really in favor of the whole sort of initiative and where it leads communities in terms of their ability to be a little bit more self-sufficient. Although I suppose my practical side feels that complete self-sufficiency is not necessarily an option, but certainly it sort of leads us more in that direction. I have a question about the activity. A couple of questions. Is the growth of food likely to be seasonal, in the sense that there would be a period of the year where there'd be a lot of food being produced and another period of the year where there would not be very much being produced or none at all? And the second question is, having lived here and failed at growing things in my yard quite often, entirely due to my own ineptitude, I am curious about what kinds of products or what kinds of foods can you see in advance that can be grown here. So the two questions were the seasonal nature, and then what are we growing here?
Well, the food is certainly going to be seasonal, but part of our mission as a demonstration farm is to show what can be done in your own space. So through the use of a greenhouse and low polytunnel in the raised beds, by covering them and taking advantage of that aspect of it, we're going to show how far you can take the growing season into the colder months. And that's one of the benefits of Prince Rupert, is that it doesn't get so cold in the winter months that there can be no growing going on. So that's a huge benefit that we have. to go, along with a couple negatives such as the immense amount of precipitation and the wind that can be a factor as well. So we're going to show the positives and the negatives, and one of the real positives is that temperature that we're going to be able to maintain with the use of the greenhouse and the low polytunnel that will allow us to do that. And then as for the food grown, we're going to try to be quite diverse in what we're growing. We're going to have a lot of prolific plants, ideally, to show what a small amount of space, such as a raised bed, can produce. Our raised beds will be approximately 12 feet by 4 feet, and then about 2 feet tall. So not a massive bed, and we're going to try to show what can be produced out of a bed that size. And that's something that can be fit into any home's yard, almost. And then, or through the use of a community garden, which we're trying to build up as well, as I was saying earlier. And then part of that diversity, one of my personal missions would be to bring back some lesser known or kind of forgotten plants. And having diversity in the garden is an excellent way to aid in the health of the garden. Having diverse plants and having a crop rotation through multiple seasons will allow for proper soil health and then really strong, healthy plants in subsequent seasons. And then that'll also benefit you nutritionally, having a diverse array of plants in your diet. So I think it aids in multiple ways. So I've been sourcing kind of interesting, like a lot of seeds online lately, and a lot of them are heavy producers, foods that everyone will know and is comfortable with, and things we can produce and preserve through the seasons. And then hopefully some more interesting plants to bring into the garden to show people what's possible and to kind of bring interest and bring kind of traditional knowledge of Indigenous plants of Canada into their diet as well.
Any other questions? Councillor Moreau.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you guys very much for coming tonight. Obviously, this is a very exciting project, and wearing my other hat for a moment, obviously, we've been partnered with EcoTrust in the past, the Niska Society, and so I'm so thrilled to see this partnership with Metlakatla. So not only a thanks to you guys for taking this on, but a thanks to Metlakatla for giving permission to allow this temporary use on their property. I think it's a really creative repurposing of a vacant lot in the downtown core. So that's excellent. My experience, just for a bit of context for you guys, in the previous iterations of partnership that the Niska Society has had with EcoTrust, all of our data is showing that food security is an urgent problem in Prince Rupert. And it might be out of sight or out of mind, but our preliminary data shows that 1,700 of the Niska citizens living in Prince Rupert and Port Edward, 1/3 of them are not eating 3 meals a day on a regular basis. And the number one reason that they're giving is the high cost, followed secondly by accessibility. So there's a tremendous amount of urgency here from my perspective in my day job, but now sitting on the other side of the table and seeing this partnership with Metlakatla, I think you guys are absolutely on the right track, and focus on kind of culturally appropriate foods and shortening supply chain, on using food as a way to break down barriers between people. I think this is such an excellent project, and so I really thank you guys for taking it on. And again, just to be explicit, I'm very thankful that you guys have created this partnership with Metlakatla, because I think without them, location, that's everything here. So I'm super excited to see this.
Okay, well, I think everyone's asked their questions, so I will end this with thanking you for your presentation again, and we will move on to the rest of our agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, moving on. We have, is there any questions from the public for our committee of the whole meeting this evening?
There were no questions or comments received.
Okay, so I guess is there any questions from anyone else as far as members of council? Nothing? Okay, so we will get a motion to adjourn to reconvene to a regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Morvan. Skelton Morvan, sorry. Okay,
We have to vote. Wait,
okay, now I'd like to,
we have to vote.
oh, pardon?
We have to vote still.
Oh, yes, I did this last time. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? None, none. Okay, now we'll move on. So we are going to go to the regular agenda. Number 2, adoption of agenda. A recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of March 22nd, 2021 be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Randawa, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? No. Okay, so 3A, minutes. Recommendation that the minutes of the special council meeting of March 8th, 2021 be adopted. Any movers? Councillor Adie moved it, and Councillor Skelton Morvan seconding it. All those in favor? Any opposed? No. 3B, recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting of March 8th be adopted. Moved by Councillor Randawa, second by, who's the seconder? Okay, Councillor Skelton Morvan. You get to pick whoever I see first on the screen, I guess. So, all those in favor? Okay. Move. Okay, 4 is petitions and delegations. So tonight we have our Chief Financial Officer in regards to the opportunity for the public to comment on the 2020 budget.
Thank you, Councillor Niche, and I will be sharing my screen now. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, good evening. This is our first of 2 public consultations on the 2021 budget. Staff presented the 2021 municipal budget on March 8th, which accompanied the report to council that day. Today, we will be showing a snapshot of that presentation. Given the PHO orders, our format for public consultation has changed this year. We have messaged for people to contact us via email or phone. As at today's deadline, 4 o'clock, there were no comments or questions received to relay to council during this particular public consultation. After taking into account the expected revenues and expense items, the city is happy to present a budget surplus. This means no increase to the property tax rate. This surplus has enabled us to propose an increase to capital reserves to mitigate future tax increases for capital replacements and renewal. We are still chipping away at our infrastructure deficit, and this will help us continue with this priority and mitigate future tax increases for this purpose. This year's budget includes the maintenance of increased funding levels for continued road paving, the utilization of debt financing for the continued construction of the dam and landfill cell, $5.3 million in construction financing for the dam provided by Legacy. The corporation will also be funding the debt repayments on the $10 million loan taken for the dam construction, and the use of provincial and federal contributions for the dam, the CN building renewal, and airport ferry relocation. The city is proposing no increase to the property tax rate for 2021. We have presented the proposed municipal rates for 2021 for residential, light industrial, business, and not-for-profit on the far right column in yellow. They are compared to the 2020 mill rates in blue. You will note the rate has decreased for residents. This is because assessed values have increased. We adjust the rate to account for this market change to the assessed values. To calculate the impact to a property owner of the recommended mill rate, one needs to compare the 2020 combined general property tax to the amount calculated for 2021. The 2020 combined general property tax can be found on the 2020 property tax notice as shown in the red circles. These are the only categories council can decide on. All the rest of the tax levies are either set by another authority or calculated based on assessed values in Prince Rupert to pay the bill the city is sent. We do not yet know what the other levies will be. The formula to calculate the general levy is on this slide. Property owners can take their current assessment multiplied by the proposed municipal rate to learn the municipal portion of their tax bill. When compared to the 2020 combined general property tax as found on the previous slide, owners will be informed whether their municipal taxes have gone up or down. Here we have provided the effect to a homeowner with an average assessed value in both 2020 and 2021. The proposed mill rate results in no change for a residential property owner with an average assessed value home in both years. As mentioned on a previous slide, the proposed residential mill rate is lower than last year. To show in real dollars the effect this has on a homeowner, provided the value of their home stayed the same, we have created the following table. This table is in a range of dollar values where the majority of residential assessed value levels exist. For simplicity, we have separated them in $50,000 increments. For example, if a homeowner's value in 2020 and 2021 is $200,000, the 2020 municipal taxes paid were $1,172, and at the proposed 2021 rate, the taxes are $1,101, or $71 less than in 2020. We have created this visual for viewers to see where their tax dollars are expected to be spent for 2021. This graph is also included in the 5-year financial plan document. The largest allocations are to RCMP at 23%, fire at 16%, recreation at 11%, roads and sidewalks at 12%, and airport ferry and grants at 6% each. These 5 categories make up 74% of the services funded through taxation. This slide shows the projected daily cost for the average homeowner in 2021. For example, every day an average household will contribute $4.43 to access all municipal services, excluding utilities. This translates into $1.73 for all protective services, 54 cents for roads and sidewalks, 67 cents for parks and recreation, 27 cents for community services grants, and 27 cents for airport access, to name approximately 80% of the services. It is expected that changes to the proposed mill rates are likely, given it is tied to assessed values. BC Assessment will release their revised roll March 31st, which will take into account any appeals to assessed value. Any reductions to assessed values may impact the proposed mill rates. Given that property taxes are not tied to ability to pay, homeowners should familiarize themselves with available programs that may offer some relief for those that qualify. The provincial government offers residents the Homeowner Grant and the Tax Deferral Program. These programs are available to reduce property taxes paid and defer the tax payments through a loan that is recovered at the time of sale. Details of these programs can be found on the provincial government website, the city's website, or on your property tax notice. The province has made a significant change to the Homeowner Grant program this year. Homeowners must make application to the province for the Homeowner Grant before the tax payment deadline on July 2nd, or a provincial penalty will be applied. Go to gov.bc.ca/homeowner grant or call toll-free 1-888-355-2700 for more information and to make application. You can no longer make application through City Hall by using your tax notice. Want to know more about how tax rates are calculated? We have a video available on our website under City Hall. In the drop-down menu, click Property Taxes. It is also available on YouTube. Search Property Taxes Prince Rupert. Residents and business owners can obtain informational documents such as our proposed 5-year financial plan, our 2021 budget presentation from March 8th, and our newly launched budget simulation through our website by clicking on 2021 City Budget under Quick Links. The budget simulation is also presented on the landing page as shown here. Submissions from the simulation will be shared with Council after the simulation closes on April 13th. Whoops, I don't know what just happened. Okay. All right, so you're still looking at it, and we will have another public consultation on April 12th, 2021, and we are requesting, because of the PHO orders, we were still requesting that people email or phone, so you can email your question or comment to finance@princerupert.ca, and the phone number to call is 250-627-0935. Please submit all of your questions and comments by 4 p.m. on April 12th. Questions will be read during the meeting and answers provided at that time. And that concludes our presentation for this evening.
Thank you. Can you, oh, there we go. Thank you, Ms. Baumann. Obviously, this is just a report and public comment, and we had very little, well, we had no public comment. So I'm assuming that we're all going to save our comments for a future date, but is there any questions that anyone had for Ms. Baumann? Oh, go ahead, Mr. Murrow.
I just wanted to ask, are we seeing much participation on that budget simulation so far? I know it's early days, but I just wanted to get a sense if anyone's participating.
Yep, we've had 48 views. Nobody has submitted a new balanced budget.
Okay, well, moving on. We are going to 5 reports and resolutions. First one is oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to encourage people to make the no comment characteristic of this part of the process go away. I think we need to hear from the public. I know that it's very difficult for us as a group to determine any changes that would need to be made or any directional decisions that need to be made without it. So in view of the inconvenience of COVID and the restrictions we're under, I really encourage members of the public that are interested to make the effort to make the comment, because it certainly helps give the process more integrity.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adey. Moving on to 5A, verbal report from iPlan in regards to temporary use permit 21-01. Go ahead, Mr. Buchan.
All right, so notifications have been sent out regarding the temporary use permit 2101. This is an application to temporarily store demolition and construction materials on a vacant P1 zone lot until the local landfill has completed its expansion. The city received a call questioning whether or not this will require additional permits from the Ministry of Environment. The applicant has specified that no additional permits are required for this proposed use. And while we are not aware of any provincial permits required, we recommend that council amend the draft permit to clarify that any additional permits will be up to the applicant at their own expense. So it is recommended that council approve this application as this use will be permitted in P1 zone once the new zoning bylaw is adopted.
Okay, can I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor Skelton Morgan and Councillor Rendawa. Is there any questions from anyone? Councillor Skelton Morgan.
Yeah, no real. I guess some questions just kind of relating to the temporary use of the. And is this to store? This was regarding the storage of the debris that's coming from the buildings. Just to clarify.
The demolition construction materials. Yeah, I guess.
Gotcha. Okay. And do they have? And as for their storage plan, did it outline? Because I may have missed some of the details here. Have they outlined kind of what they're utilizing to store the materials, or how we're going to be using that?
So it will be industrial grade bags. They provide the name. I don't have it on me, but I can send that out if required.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, no, just more of clarification for members of the public, because I know there was a lot of concern and discussion around what it was going to be stored in and how that was kind of pertaining, but also that there was a few misconceptions on where it was in proximity to the water, and it's not like it's being stored right on the shore. I would imagine it's more further back, kind of inward, and that this just kind of has to be done, to my understanding, because we don't have capacity in our landfill until the silo is done. So yeah, so awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Cunningham. Oh, no. Okay.
Oh, I changed my mind.
Okay. So hearing no more questions, all in favor? Any opposed? No. Okay. So, well, I guess that's just a verbal report, so we don't really need to go any further with that for now. B, which is development permit 21-04.
So yes, development variance permit 2104. Notifications have been sent out regarding the development variance permit 2104. Sorry. This is an application for a property located at 1424 8th Avenue East. The applicant is requesting a variance for a front lot line setback from 3.6 meters to 0 meters for a proposed sun deck and entrance. We haven't received any public feedback from the neighborhood in regard to this application. And because there wasn't any neighborhood concern expressed, it is recommended that council approve this application.
Okay, do you have a mover? Councillor Scout Morgan and Councillor Cunningham, seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Okay, moving on. Development variance permit 2025 for 250 Parker Drive.
This is an application for a R2 zone property located at 250 Parker Drive, which requests a variance to increase the maximum height for a principal building from 9.0 meters to 10.46 meters for a proposed residential building. A few neighbors to this lot have submitted letters in opposition to this proposed height variance. Council may wish to deny this application because of the concern expressed in these letters. However, it is recommended that council proceed to the statutory public notification to provide the neighborhood a full opportunity to provide feedback.
Is there any questions? Councillor Adie.
Yeah, I'm just curious in looking at the diagram, the front view of the proposed building. There's 3 floors there, and I'm just wondering whether the application for a height variance is a game breaker in terms of being able to build the 3 floors in this structure, or would there be another way to go if they were to try and construct that home within current bylaws, not needing a variance?
Through the chair, I think that may be the case. We did encourage the building designer to see if they could lower the building to avoid a height variance, and they were not able to achieve that. They did amend the plans from an earlier version to reduce the floor area because it was actually larger than what the square footage allowed. So you know, I think that you'd be looking at a significant amendment to the plans at this point to achieve this without a variance.
Is there a follow-up to that? No? Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, I drove up there and looked at this, and you know, if I'm correct, the height variance they're going for is between 4 and 5 feet, which is considerable. And I think this is going to stick out like a sore thumb, considering other people in the area had wanted to go higher and didn't or couldn't. And I've talked to some of the people that are around there, and they're all dead set against it. So, you know, whether, you know, we've already heard most of the complaints about it. If we go to a public hearing, then fine. You know, we go to it, but we're just going to hear the same thing over again. It's quite controversial in that area, and it's kind of an upscale area. And I'm just a little concerned if we allow this, and if we're going to get other requests for variances for height, they're taking away some people's views and things, people that moved in there years ago. And that, I know you move into a place, and if something isn't developed, good luck sometimes. But most of the houses up in that area are situated away so that if they're all built at the same height that they're supposed to be, people are going to lose their view and things like this. So I definitely don't support this.
Councillor Skelton Morgan.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of the kind of the commonalities with Councillor Cunningham's statement, as well as just for us to go through the hoops to start a public process. I would imagine we'd hear a lot of the same complaints, and it sounds like there is quite significant resistance in the area. So I would think that our plan of attack, and I'd be up for moving a motion to deny the application as it stands, just to kind of remove that additional hoop and hurdle, for those folks to express their opinions kind of as such anyways. So
Is there a seconder to that?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, is there any further comments? Councillor Moreau.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think this question may be best directed at the city manager, but perhaps Rob and Chris, you guys can answer this for me. So there's recognition, obviously, that there's been a significant number of concerns already addressed to the city before we even began the statutory process, but that your recommendation is still to proceed with the public notification. And so I'm wondering if we were to go with your recommendation as it's written, would moving it to public notification negate all of the concerns that have already been submitted, or would those comments already received be automatically included in the process? And if not, would it be appropriate for us as council, if we did move forward with that recommendation, to forward all of those complaints and concerns to corporate administration? And then, sorry, just to end it with this question. What is the rationale or the benefit for us to proceed with the statutory notification process, knowing full well that we're going to receive significant opposition?
Through the chair, those are very good questions. I think to answer one of them, yes, I think you could forward all of the submissions to date. The notion of the full going out to referrals for full opportunity is that we're not saying that there will be, but there's a possibility that there might be some support because we didn't actually get the notices out in the past. So I think that basically it's trying to be as fair as possible to the applicant, where I'm not anticipating that there will be support, but there's a possibility. We're just trying to be fair on that. But the recommendation or the comments were that you certainly would be reasonable to deny it at this point, given the opposition.
I appreciate that. That just as a brief subsequent then. So there's no trying to be fair to the applicant is one thing, but I just want to make sure that we're not opening ourselves up to any potential liability and rejecting this based on significant opposition already received before we even went to notification.
I see no liability to deny it at this point.
Councillor Adie.
Yeah, I think I would take a contrary view, not because I feel one way or another about the proposal, although I will confess that I have some thoughts on it. More in the interest of process and defending the process that is available to the public. I acknowledge that if we were to vote down the current motion, which I think is to deny the application at this point, what we would then be doing is agreeing that we should go through the rest of the public process. And I do agree that we're quite likely to hear more in the way of objections to the plan as it stands. And that's okay. I also recognize, though, that the applicant might feel that they have not had access to a full process if we don't in fact choose to go through the process. So I would like to suggest that, in my opinion, we should not stop the process at this point. I think we should go through it. I don't know whether that's going to change anything or not. I just think that that's a question of fairness, and I think perhaps in light of the fact that this is one proposal, but it's a proposal of a process that we go through multiple times with multiple other applicants for other projects, and I think that to not afford the same process to this one that we've afforded to many others and will continue to do so in the future runs the risk of seeming unfair.
Councillor Skelton Morvan.
For me, I'm having a little bit of deja vu, given that we had a similar circumstance that I voted in kind of in opposition of what exactly is happening now with an amendment and the argument made prior, although different circumstances, different parameters, was that it was a redundant process and that they could apply again with some amendments. But it sounds like there's a little bit of other moving parts with this factors that they cannot recoup the story without having the amendment. So having that additional on top of that, I mean, for me, I would implore, I guess, some flexibility around that. But for me, as I'm seeing it, as the resistance is coming up right in the middle of this process, and I'm all for fair process as well. For me, again, having a little bit of deja vu, but just the roles have kind of little bit reversed. So for me, I'm maintaining some flexibility and an open mind. But what I'm seeing right now is innate opposition, but I would be open to going through and make an amendment to the process. I'm not sure if Councillor Cunningham is open to that as well as the seconder, but Blair, go ahead. I know Blair wanted to jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Cunningham. I mean, Merle.
Councillor Skelton-Morvan is right. Councillor Skelton-Morvan was right that Councillor Cunningham seconded that motion if he wants to do a friendly amendment. I was going to say, I actually tend to agree with Councillor Adey around due process, even if it does result in the same significant opposition, knowing that we can include all the comments that have already been received. I guess this is just one more procedural question in trying to project what could happen in the interest of fairness for the applicant. If we receive a number of complaints or even pieces of constructive criticism from neighbors that say, I would support this type of variance for this type of purpose, or this is the type of revision that if they made to their proposal, then I wouldn't be in opposition to. With this particular application, would the applicant then have the ability as part of this process to adapt their proposal under this current application for us to consider any amendments, or would we have to go through the process, reject the current proposal based on the opposition received, and then they submit an amended proposal to try to overcome some of those concerns and complaints from neighbors?
Through the chair, I think that as long as the variance is being reduced, there can be conditions set on an approval of the variance. So I think that opens the door for some adaptation during the process. Right up to the meeting at the council a meeting where it's decided upon.
So I'm not sure how you want to proceed, Mr. Chair, with if that is a friendly amendment that reads moving. I'll let that procedural piece work out first, because if not, then I'll move the alternative motion if you want to vote that down. If you prefer.
Okay, let's just finish the questions here first before we go on our comments, and then we can hash out the details at the end here. But Councillor Randhawa.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So, is the amendment already done, or the motion is on floor right now? So, can you explain me, please?
Well, right now, I believe it's Councillor Skelton-Morvan, I believe, put a motion forward but I think he wants to withdraw that one now, right?
Well, it was a denied motion initially, and Councillor Cunningham had seconded it. But I guess before we go into that, I just want to jump in on, as the deja vu gets more and more intense, just in the sense of fairness, for me, where it sounded like, again, it's the roles reversed, where my previous motion regarding a different matter was along the lines of an amendment in that application, but we ended up coming to the conclusion that to deny it so that they can reapply, because we would not prevent them from reapplying. But yeah, I understand that there's a couple of different parameters in this particular instance, but at the same time, I see that just for them to go through that process just to be turned down anyways, versus making an amendment at this stage and kind of going from there. But it doesn't sound like they have a lot of wiggle room to add that additional story, which again, we can strike it down here without liability, or we can go through the hoops of going through that and then having a lot of the same resistance anyway. So it really depends. I'm open to either or. So I try to remain impartial, but at the same time, again, the ringings of deja vu, where like just the roles reversed a little bit for me was to prior motion and conversation from a previous meeting was in the lines of just kind of making a friendly amendment regarding a particular property, that particular property, to make an adjustment on what they were to develop it. But we ended up just turning it down, which I again had flexibility on that one. For me, I'm just kind of seeing, in the name of fairness, this sounds very familiar, kind of in the similarities in the circumstances, again, with some slight differentials in the sense that they cannot get that extra story and that extra floor in there. So for me, but I'll let Councillor Cunningham jump in as a seconder because I think he's wanted to jump in the conversation as well.
I just want to speak myself on this one too. I think comparing this one to the previous one that you're talking about, Mr. Skelton Morgan, is different in the sense that was a side yard setback, and whether that person was 3 inches or 3 feet inside a side yard setback, the neighbors were in complete opposition of it. So in order to be in that side setback, that would be different. In this situation, as the proposal stands, I'm against it because I don't feel that 4.5 feet or whatever it was in meters, 1.46 meters. I think that's a substantial height variance to ask for it on a piece of land that is flat. We've had this scenario come up in the past with substantial height variances, but they've been on sloped properties that, at street level may only show a story and a half, but at the back of the house, maybe 3.5 stories. So, on some of our higher sloping land, but on this particular property, I feel it's a flat piece of property. And the way that the bylaws are written as far as height requirements go, it's based on averages of finished grade, and this finished grade is essentially street level, and so for them to put a 3rd story on, they're either going to have to blast rock out in order and when I say 3rd story, you could build a 3-story house on that property without a height variance if you adjusted your if you look at their heights of their ceilings. I mean, one is 9 foot. Let me just have a look at this again here. They've got one at 9'2", but that's including the floor joist. So that's probably an 8-foot ceiling. The middle floor they've got at 11'2", so that's probably more like a 10-foot ceiling. And the top floor they have a 9-foot ceiling. So if you did an average home build is an 8-foot ceiling. So if you took 3 8-foot ceiling floors and went at that's 24 feet plus the thickness of your roof and your floor joists, you can be under the height variance and build a 3-story building. These people are choosing to apply for height variance in order to get higher ceilings inside their house. I know there's another property right next door to it that they actually blasted out the rock in order to get that 3rd story in and have not a flat roof like this one is proposing, but have more of a sloped roof. So I think it's a bit of a slippery slope to start allowing that much height variance on a flat piece of property. It's one thing to accept it when it's when there's a big variation from the street level to the backyard. And so, it's just my I guess my builder's perspective on this. So now let's get into the process of how we're going to proceed with this. Sorry, Barry, go ahead. Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, you sort of hit the nail on the head. What I'm looking at is the heights from the basement to up. That could be adjusted to make it. And we had a concern about the square footage of this house to begin with. They adjusted that, and now they're still going for the variance in heights. And I think it's an exercise in futility because the immediate neighbors are dead set against this. And I think by postponing it, we're just postponing the inevitable. So, we can go to public notice, but we've already got input from all the immediate neighbors, and every immediate neighbor is against it. So, we can go through the process, and it's just a process and futility as far as I'm concerned, but when we've already heard from it. And I drove up there and looked at it, and neighbors came out immediately to talk to me and against it and that. So, either way, it doesn't really matter, because it's not going to go ahead whether we go through public notification or not. And, if we're just dealing with the immediate neighbors, then there's no way it's going to go through. If we open it up to a larger area, maybe, but I couldn't see it. The people a block away were complaining about it. So, but that's just my 2 bits on it.
It's definitely an interesting neighborhood, in the sense that it once was a new neighborhood with houses being built 25 years ago, and with the downfall of our economy, and now all of a sudden you're getting new houses being built again. So it's probably a rare, in comparison to most residential developments, where it's basically had 2 phases to it, and all incorporated together, because you have houses that were built in the 90s they look a certain way, they're built a certain way, but there was a lot of empty lots that were left there during our economic downfall, and now people are wanting to build on these lots, and they're wanting to build to, I guess, different looks and different they have different ideas than what was originally done in most of this area 25 years ago. But that's enough of that. Now we'll go to the sorry, Councillor Ady, you have something else to say?
No, I just wanted to clarify I'm not speaking as somebody who's in favor of the proposed building or against it. I'm simply saying that there is a process here, and I think, Councillor Cunningham, you may well be correct that it's going in the same direction, regardless of whether we choose to stop it here or at the end. But I do think that I'll maintain that I think what we're trying to decide here is not whether this is a good building or not, a good proposal or not. We're trying to decide whether to give it full process or not. And my contention is that we should give it full process, and if it ends up in the same place, so be it.
I can kind of agree with you on that one, in the sense that if we do proceed to a public notification, then that maybe give the opportunity for the builder to come up with changes if requested from the people, as far as the height variance goes. Like I see 4.5 feet being fairly excessive, but maybe if they adjust some of their plans and with some input from people, that they may decide that they want to drop the height of the ceiling and get within maybe a foot or 1.5 feet. Because I thought when it first came out the first time, I thought it was only 1.6 feet that was on the original variance. So anyways, let's try and sort out this procedure part of it now. So where are we at, Ms. Miller, if you can explain where we're at here with the procedure so far?
Speaking of procedure, I just wanted to jump and ask Mr. Buckingham if when it comes to a variance and I guess making changes throughout that application, would they then have to start over the process anyways, or can they make that part ways through the public hearing process? Just for me, now I'm kind of concerned about procedural, because if it was better for us to just strike it down as is now, for them to come back with a new application, which again very much echoes the previous situation that we found ourselves in last time. But again, I understand very different parameters when it was about an overhang regarding a height variance. So it's two very different matters, but very similar kind of process. So for me, my question lies, would they then be able to make changes to that application throughout the public hearing process, or would they then have to start over with a different variance or an application that may not even require a variance in the first place?
Through the chair, I think that changes can be made during the process, as long as it's not increasing. If it's lesser, so, a council can set parameters. If, for example, they could say, no, we'll give you a variance of 1 foot. That's all we're comfortable with. But if you were to increase the amount of the variance, I think you'd be obliged to go and re-notify.
And yeah, okay. Okay, awesome. Thank you. And I guess when it comes to procedure, then for me, I still can maintain we can make a friendly amendment because for me, I am for the process as well. But if we were to, again, it just echoes a lot of the previous notion, which again was some flexibility required just to strike it down and have them come back with a new application. I'm open to procedural if corporate administrator wanted to jump in.
Actually, I got Council Moreau was wanting to say something.
Okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to echo Councillor Ady's point again. And just add one subsequent point just around process. So, the applicant's already shown that they're willing to adjust their proposal based on feedback from the city. They haven't been privy, I think, to a lot of the complaints that councillors have received, unless I'm mistaken and the neighbors have submitted their concerns directly to the applicant. I'm not aware of that. But having them not been privy to those complaints, moving forward with the process, will put those concerns on public record for that applicant to actually consider and hopefully respond and adjust to them. And the other piece I would just say is about the precedent we want to set for future applications. I don't want to see us get in the habit of rejecting proposals outright without due process. Even if we all do have strong feelings, or there is strong feelings in the neighborhood, I still think we want to move forward with due process and give these projects the light of day. The only other point I would make is, in the spirit of making adjustments or responding to some of these concerns, I'm sure a lot of people in that neighborhood would be supportive in concept of the creation of new housing in Prince Rupert. We all know that there's a critical shortage, and I'm sure they would all be supportive of including a secondary suite in that neighborhood. I think it fits really well, and it's a way to get more occupancy and more units ultimately on the market. So even if we get all the exact same concerns and complaints, I don't really have any hesitation in moving forward with public notification.
Councillor Cunningham.
Well, basically, I'd say let's, if it's up to the mover, but I would recommend that we withdraw the denial and let it go to public notice and then go from there. If that's the problem that people are having, I think just about every variance, then, we can look at every variance like this and say, okay, let it go to the public and let the neighbors decide. It's not up to us. We don't live in the neighborhood. So if the neighbors don't want it, they'll come out and tell us. And so let it go to the public notice. I'm quite willing to withdraw my motion that I seconded if Councillor Reed Skelton Morvins feels the same way. And then we'll just let it go to public notice. I see it sort of, like I said, an exercise in futility, but because their neighbors are, it's a very young neighborhood. There's lots of young kids there, things like this. And, when I drove around there, kids are everywhere. So the flavor of the neighborhood is what we've got to listen to.
Yeah, for me, I'm open to withdraw or friendly amendment, however we want to proceed. Like for me, like I said, I've had an open mind about, and I am in favor of due process. Just for me, if again, just echoing a lot of the notions that we had before, where again we were kind of doing a lot of the similar circumstance, just with a different matter, and the specifics were a little different, but the circumstances are quite, I guess, around it are quite similar. So for me, I'm fairly open to whether we want to withdraw or make an amendment. At this point, it's just up to procedural.
Okay, well, if you're willing to withdraw, I guess that settles that. So that friendly amendment has been withdrawn then. Just to final piece on it then, before we vote on this. I think it's pretty obvious from our perspectives that we're not too keen on the particular application the way it sits. And from the sounds of the neighborhood, it sounds as though they're not really too keen on this either. So what I would probably suggest is that maybe our planners in their contact, if we vote this through to continue to public notification, is that if we choose to go that route, that they contact the applicant and voice, you know, I guess you can say kind of preliminary opposition to this variance from both council and from the people that live in the area, and that they probably, if they're looking to get something to happen, they probably need to get closer to the actual height that is in our bylaws for a standard build, and they can do that, you know, through many adjustments. It can be done through building retaining walls, and it can be done through many different ways, adjusting their building plans. So we will stop at that then, and we will. So we had the mover and the seconder for the original. Did we have a mover and a seconder for the original to proceed to public notification? No? Okay, so do we have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Adey, all those in favor? Opposed? None. So yes, so that being said, if you can please tell them, Mr. Buchan, that it's not looking very favorable for them, and if they would want to make adjustments, it probably would be in their best interest to maybe make some adjustments, or at least maybe reach out to some of their neighbors that have concerns, because their neighbors were concerned, and I think we are concerned also. So thank you.
I'm sorry, could I just jump in? I would want to feel that I'm going to retain an open mind until the process is complete. I hear the tone of the discussion, and I reckon, and I've read the objections of the neighbors as well. But I do think that if we're going to support the process, we have to support an impartial process. So I think that as the process unfolds, we need to bear that in mind.
Not disagreeing with you at all. Just trying to make sure that the applicant understands the flavor or the appetite of what is going on. And anyone's mind is free to be changed until the day we vote on it.
I'd like to note that I am impartial and have maintained impartially at this time as well.
Okay. So now just let me catch up to where we are. Okay, D, report from my plan on development permit 2106 for 608 6th Avenue East.
This is an application for a R2 zoned property located at 608 8th Avenue East, which requests a variance to reduce the minimum front lot line setback from 3.6 meters to 1.2 meters, and a variance to reduce the minimum side lot line setback from 1.2 meters to 0.6 meters. The applicant is requesting these setback variances for a proposed storage shed located in the front of the lot. It is recommended that council proceeds with the statutory public notification to allow the neighborhood the opportunity to provide feedback.
Can I get a mover and a seconder on this one? Councillor Moreau, Councillor Cunningham. So any comments or questions?
Let's just proceed to the public hearing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to bring up something on this one because I feel it is a pretty important one. This is an interesting one because this is not one like that I've ever seen before, and reading the details on it. So now, obviously, this person's house is set back fairly far on their property, meaning that they can't really put a wood shed on the back of the property, and they want to put it in the front. And I'm gonna say that it is proceeding down probably even a slippery slope when you are allowing somebody to build a shed basically almost at the front of their property. But more of my concerns on this one was that the foundation, it's saying gravel and pad, and so I've always been under the understanding that if you stay under the 100 square feet, which would be 10 by 10 or 8 by 12 building, you can basically essentially do what you want as far as how it's supported, because it's not considered a structure. But in this situation, this building is quite a bit bigger. It's 16 feet. It's 10 feet high. It's 10 feet wide. It is a substantial structure, and from my understanding in the building code, as soon as you're over that 100 square feet, you are required to build a foundation, a proper foundation for it that meets building code. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. And so when I see the foundation being gravel and pad, it concerns me that someone may go in there and scrape a bit of dirt off the ground, put some gravel on the ground, put some pads down, build a massive 10 by 16 shed on the front of their property. And within a couple of years, being that it's not properly supported, and that it could, start to lean or become an issue, and then start to become an eyesore. So it's not that I'm opposed to somebody building this structure this size. It would be nice to see them move it back a little bit further in the front setback, because I don't think sheds right on the street almost are that appealing. But I just kind of want to understand more the foundation. So I don't know if we should maybe ask some more questions before proceeding any further with this, and seeing what the requirements are for the building code for this, or what their intentions are. Maybe you can answer some of that.
Mr. Chair, this structure is more than 100 square feet. It will require a building permit. If it requires a building permit, it will need to comply with the building code.
Okay. I was just concerned when I saw gravel and pad on the there, but I was just wondering because it is a shed.
Yeah.
So I guess that being said, being the discussion we just had on the last one, I'm assuming that everyone wants to proceed to public notification. So did I ask for a mover and seconder on that already? I did, yes. So Councillor Cunningham, you had something to say?
Well, I think the building or the planner hit the nail right on the head. We can tell it to go to public notice, but the minute they ask for a building permit, they have to build the code. And, there's some aspects of this that might not make building code, so they're going to have to make some changes anyway. So I think, we can let it go to public notice, but in the meantime, if it's going to exceed the 100 square feet, then they definitely have to build it to building codes. So that's a bridge they'll have to cross when they get to it. But I agree. Let's let it go to public.
Is there anybody else? Okay, that being said, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? So we will be moving to public notification on that one. And the next one is, we have E, which is another report from iPlan. You're a busy man tonight, Mr. and Mr. Buchan, the both of you. Temporary use permit 2102.
Right. So as you're aware, this is an application for a C3 zone property located within the downtown core at 225-227 2nd Avenue West. The applicant, EcoTrust Canada, has requested permission to operate a temporary urban farm on this property. This includes the temporary construction of a greenhouse, raised garden beds, a tool shed, and covered deck. It is recommended that council proceed with the statutory public notification to allow the neighborhood an opportunity to provide feedback. Sorry.
That being the recommendation, is there a mover and a seconder? Councillor Moreau and Councillor Adey. Is there any other questions? No? Okay. That being said, no more questions. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Now, are you sticking around, Mr. Buchan? Because I do have some. I guess you're doing the next one too here. So, for the zoning bylaws. So we will do report and planning, zoning bylaws amendment, and public engagement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report provides a summary of the public engagement undertaken on the draft zoning bylaw. In brief, the public supported the proposed bylaw policies. There were 409 reviews of the zoning bylaw project page. Of the 198 people who undertook the online survey, 87 of the participants provided one or more comments. This report also recommends 2 amendments to the zoning bylaw for council consideration. First, it is recommended that council consider amending the draft zoning bylaw to implement a new special care residential zone to accommodate for a transitional housing revitalization project at the property known as Raffles Inn. This renovation of the older hotel will renew the existing building in a partnership with BC Housing to provide for 92 transitional housing units. This project is in the pre-application phase, and the proposed zone will enable the project to proceed. Second, it is recommended that council consider amending the draft zoning bylaw to include distilleries within the list of retail liquor sales exemptions. This will allow a distillery to operate with retail sales within the C5 zone. And last, we have been made aware of a 2016 zoning bylaw amendment, number 3398, which introduced regulations on retail liquor sales. This direction has restricted the sales of all retail liquor within a 1 kilometer buffer in the downtown core. Grocery store retail liquor sales were a major concern with council at the time. The new zoning bylaw would provide for exemptions to this restriction, and these exemptions include pubs, restaurants, and grocery stores. Council may wish to confirm these exemptions or delete the grocery store exemption as previously provided for in the 2016 zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay, so so this is just a report, so we don't have to vote on this. Oh no, sorry. So do we have a mover and a seconder for that one then? Councillor Adie? Councillor Moreau?
I have a question before we do that. I'm wondering whether we should entertain one motion to deal simultaneously with all 3 of these provisions, or whether we should be dealing with each one of them in turn. And I'm going to suggest, from my perspective at least, that they're quite different in scope and subject. I think we might be better dealing with them separately. In which case, the motion would be just for the first one, and then we'll go through the thing 3 times. I'm willing to hear what other people have to say about that.
It looks like our policy guru, Councillor Moreau, would like to speak on this one.
That's the second time that Councillor Adie's beat me to the punch on talking about the importance of process. So I'm just so thankful that I'm not the only procedural junkie on council anymore. This is great. Just to be clear, that means I support his recommendation to do these as separate motions because they are pretty different in substance.
Okay, well, let's sort this out individually then. I guess I guess I should check with Ms. Miller if this is the way how we should proceed with this.
Yeah, you're free to proceed in this manner.
Okay, so I'm just trying to find that paper now where it's got all 3 of those listed. Sorry, give me a second.
Just on the very last page, I can make it easy for you. I'll move that council amend the zoning bylaw to add a new RS2 zone. Start with that.
Okay, is there a mover and a seconder? So you're moving that one, Councillor Moreau, did you say?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Councillor Skelton Morgan is the seconder. And all in favor?
I have a question.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Questions. Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
My question is, and this is partly based in the comment of somebody I was talking to, who had noted that with respect to the Raffles project, that things had started, things had happened, scaffolding had been erected, and then for the last number of weeks, it seems to have stopped. So my question is this amendment to the bylaw what that project is waiting for?
Certainly, this amendment to the bylaw has to occur for that project to proceed. The project also needs a development permit, which has not yet been applied for. So we were in pre-application discussions, and as we do with that, we go through a zoning check. And in looking at the current and the new zoning bylaw, in neither case was this allowed. So we need a new zone, and it's certainly a supportable project. So that's why we brought it to you now to try to take advantage of the opportunity that the new bylaw provides.
Any other questions? Councilor Moreau.
This is a question more just out of curiosity, not to change my vote in any direction, but I'm wondering that it would seem to me that the new transition house built beside the existing one on Park Avenue would fall under this category as well. So I'm wondering what, and I'm sorry, it might be before your guys' time, I'm wondering what that one ended up getting zoned as, and if it'd be more appropriate for that one to fall under this category. Or am I misunderstanding the projects and they are completely different uses in relation to housing?
Can't speak with much authority on this because we're not certain off the top of our heads what the adjacent property is zoned. There is an RS zone in place right now. I'm not sure what that adjacent property is zoned. So what we will do though is we will take a look at it, and if there is an issue with the zoning on it, we can put it into it may amend this bylaw if you like to make sure that it is legal.
Is there, Councillor Cunningham?
So that being the case, should we go ahead with it?
So, say that again, sorry, Councillor Cunningham?
Well, that being the case, to the question to the planner, should we go ahead with this? Or wait till we find out if it's legal?
We would recommend going ahead with this because we know that this particular property needs to have a change in zoning in order to support it to proceed. It's an unknown with the other one, but as we have to take a look at that. But if there is a need to change that zoning, we'll be back to you.
Is there any other questions? Councillor Rendawa.
So, like changing only one zoning we are talking, or we are talking all zonings, like that way everybody will lose their their interest there.
The proposal is to add a new RS2 zone to allow this specific project. So it would only be this one property that would get rezoned RS2.
So all other properties neighborhood, they will stay whatever they are, like C1 or what, right? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Eady.
The reason I asked the question in the first place is I think that the wheels of this project have been set in motion, and it's in motion for all kinds of good social reasons. And so I think that we should go ahead and support it and allow that project to reach its conclusion.
Okay, if there's no more questions, who's all in favor of this one? Any opposed? Councillor Cunningham is opposed. Oh, no, you're not opposed. Okay.
Just voting on.
Sorry, Councillor Cunningham, can you turn your mic on for a sec?
No,
Your hand was raised a little late, so I just want to make sure you're
late getting my hand up, that's all.
okay. So you're not opposed. Okay.
Yeah. As was I. I was in there. Yeah, the audio cut out for a sec there. So I'm in favor. I'm not opposed. Yeah.
The joys of Zoom meetings. Okay, so it sounds like it's unanimous then for the first one. Okay, the second one, I guess, is to include distilleries into section 3.15.0 and retail liquor sales list of exemptions. Now, this is where you're want to just confirm this here, Mr. Buchan. You're saying that talking about the grocery stores being in this exemption also. So I just want to make sure that we are, let me just have a read through this here. So the second one here that we're going to vote on, can you just can you read it how you see it, as far as what's with the grocery stores? Because I think this is a conversation that we had quite a bit of debate about in the past as far as the grocery stores go, and I do want to add my 2 cents to this when we get to that point. But I just want you to read to me what the second part to this is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the past week, we've been made aware of this previous direction in 2016 by council. So we just wanted to ask you to look over these exemptions again, because it might be going into a different direction than previously in 2016.
And Mr. Chair, if I may add to that, if it is council's wish to ensure that grocery stores are not a part of that exempt list, you would amend this motion to say, include distilleries but exclude grocery stores.
Okay, well, I'm going to actually make that motion if I can get a seconder. But my motion being that we keep grocery stores out of this bylaw, because I think that our intention in 2016 was to support local business. We have a fair bit of liquor establishments as far as retail sales of liquor, and we were, this was a fairly long conversation, I believe, the last time, and I think most of us were fairly supportive of keeping local jobs and local businesses having the liquor sales and keeping the grocery stores out of it. So I'm still supportive of adding the distillery, because I think that's a whole different piece to it. I think that the distilleries are more like a brewery, or just it's not the kind of like the same retail sales as say a liquor store or grocery store. So that would be my my amendment, if I can get a seconder on that one. Councilor 80. Okay, any discussion?
Sorry, no, I was going to do the process.
So you're not a seconder. Do I have a
seconder? I'll second it, because I originally sponsored that bill, and Wade and I supported it very strongly in the beginning. It was the original bill was to support local retail outlets and including the government liquor store, which is only blocks away from Safeway. And we had quite a strong debate about that, but in the end, most people supported the idea of keeping local jobs here, because if you put liquor in the commercial grocery stores, all you're going to get is one 19-year-old clerk that's going to be checking people out, and pretty soon you're going to be eroding the other businesses, and that's something we debated quite hotly about, and I definitely support exempting them from it.
Yeah, I support.
Councilor 80.
Yeah, no, I think that I saw the two things as quite separate. I think the conversation we can have around distilleries is very different. I take no issue with what people are saying about the exemption for grocery stores. I just wonder if it's simpler if we just do one at a time. So if we are talking about grocery stores as either exempted or removing them from the exemption list, that's one subject. We could resolve that and then move on to a decision about the distilleries.
Well, I think we've already got a motion on the floor, and I don't think that we need to separate it all out, because it's really the reality is that it's one conversation. It's just that it's come to their attention. So I think we can probably keep it the same. Is there any other conversation on this, Councilor Randhawa?
Yeah, I will support your motion, and I would like to keep grocery stores out and support our local business. And yeah, I don't think we need to separate it, and I support your motion.
Councillor Cunningham.
I support exempting distillery-based type operations simply because they employ a lot of people. You know, like it's not just a one-person job. It's you start a microbrewery and you're going to be employing a few people. And I definitely support something like that.
Is there anybody else? Okay, so that being no one else wants to speak, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so that's the second part of it, and the third one was there a third part to this one that we wanted to do, Mr. Buchan?
Proceeding to public hearing for OCP and bylaw. To make it simpler, I'll move that motion. I'll move that we proceed to public hearing for the OCP and zoning bylaw with those two amendments.
Okay, is it mover and seconder is Councillor Rendawa? Any questions as far as anything else is concerned in the bylaws? Councillor Cunningham.
It's more an observation or a comment. I'm really disappointed in the lack of participation. When you look at the numbers in the different categories and that, and you know, when you see that only 195 people actually participated in this survey, it's kind of disappointing because it's really affecting the whole town in different ways. And for very few people to participate in this, I don't know. I don't know how much more the city could do to communicate this to the residents, but it's just somewhat disappointing that so few people participated in it.
Councillor Eadie.
By the same token, if you put 195 people in a room and called it a public meeting, you'd say it was a pretty good meeting.
I wanted to add something to this myself, or actually I have a question for Mr. Buchan first. So in the, I was trying to find it and I just couldn't come upon it as far as when we've had some of these draft zoning bylaws and stuff. And there was one that was brought up in the past, and it had travelers accommodations on it. And it was something to do with the use of trailers. And I just want you to clarify if that's still on the current, because I couldn't seem to find it.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the previous direction was to amend the definition of traveler's accommodation. It was unclear, kind of vague before, prior to this update. And it allowed people to rent out a makeshift motel through a RV or something. So we've amended that to restrict it to permanent buildings only.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that was not including properties similar to, as an example, the transition house that was built by BC Housing on Park Avenue last year, which uses modular units. And I just wanted to confirm that that by the wording trailers, we're not including modular units on that, because I think modular units, although sometimes come by trailer, are not trailers, and they are building structures and are put onto a foundation. So I just want to confirm that.
You are, thank you, Mr. Chair, you are correct. A modular building would be considered permanent.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Eadie.
Yeah, just with respect to the, in the report you broke down the panels, the slides that people were responding to. Just a couple of thoughts on two of them, maybe three if I turn the page. The panel number 2 is about the home occupations, and just in light of the presentation we just got about the urban agriculture temporary use permit, and we've agreed to move forward with that. It does seem to me that, and there is some comment here in that regard, it does seem to me that as we move forward, if we determine from the project that occurs on Second Avenue that this is a thing that we're going to expand upon in the community, we do need, I think, to develop a more detailed and nuanced bylaw language around that, what urban agriculture is, what it isn't, what's unique here compared to what a bylaw like that might look like in another city in a different climate. And so I would like to see us kind of bridge the gap between the temporary use permit project and our bylaws and the language that we start to develop around the concept of urban agriculture. And the second point, with regard to the parking standards, it says that 22% of the respondents stated that the city should focus on increasing the alternative transportation infrastructure and opportunities. I'm just wondering whether the thing that would make that a reality is the active transportation plan that we've talked about before, and where that active transportation plan fits in terms of the process of change that we're going through. Maybe I'm going to offer that as a question.
Through the chair, the active transportation plan, quite a number of plans are identified in addition in the official community plan, the draft official community plan, for subsequent activity. Now, we've actually taken on some of those in early fashion, like the interim housing strategy and the zoning bylaw in an effort to move forward quickly and on very pressing needs. But the active transportation plan as a part of a master integrated transportation plan is identified as an important next step or soon to come next step.
No follow-up? Okay, Councillor Cunningham.
That said, 7 people were focusing on increasing alternate transportation, but 6 people wanted more on-street parking. So when you look at the two, there's only a difference of 1 person, and I don't know if increasing alternate transportation is going to help parking downtown or not. People in Prince Rupert, it's a small town. Alternate transportation would just be walking compared to driving downtown. But it's one of those things that, again, 7 and 6, when you walk down 3rd Avenue at 8 o'clock in the morning and see the number of cars already parked there, people starting work and things like that, alternate transportation might help, but at the same time, increased parking would help too. So I really don't know what the answer is to get more people involved, but just the fact that 6 and 7, it's such a close number.
Councillor Moreau.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just going back as the subject of 2, I want to agree again with Councillor Adie. I was actually a little bit heartened to see the feedback, just keeping in mind, we've got hundreds of responses for Vision 2030, hundreds of responses for the official community plan, and now almost 200 on the zoning bylaw. And from my perspective, those things get less and less interesting or less and less for public consumption, where Vision 2030 is something that I think engages the whole community, gives us permission to think really big and long term. Official community plan, you might be thinking 10 years in the future, some concrete steps. And then the zoning bylaw is, a little bit more minutia of detail. So, I think it's expected that we're seeing slightly less engagement. But on the whole, what I'd say less than the number of responses is I'm actually more heartened to see the level of broad-based support for the majority of changes that we're proposing here. And that's consistent with what we've seen with the very high levels of support for Vision 2030 and how to incorporate those planning principles and ideas into the official community plan. So as far as I'm concerned, that's heartening to me to see the direction that we're going. The one surprise, though, that I do have a little bit of a question on, just maybe a bit more context, was the kind of split support and not necessarily opposition, but concern or request for more information on the Ridley Island Highway and industrial expansion. So you guys made particular note to that, and I actually thought something like building heights or parking standards would be a lot more controversial, but this one actually proved to be the one that received the most mixed bag of responses. So I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit more context, particularly around what types of information people wanted to know that would help them make a decision for or against, but also was the majority of the opposition because people didn't have enough information, or was it because they're in disagreement with the principle?
Through the chair, our sense is that it was more to do with wondering what kind of projects were going in, and there aren't any projects. This is just trying to make sure there's enough industrial land base for the future, making some sense out of water line adjustments, putting some of the zoning in around the islands. There's no additional information to give. I mean, it's a logical thing. You're saying for a member of the public to say, you're increasing the zoning, what's the project? But this is really just about enabling a land base without any particular projects.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. So I feel like the work that we have to do then really in public outreach is, I think, talk a little bit more about our rationale for wanting to make that change. And from my perspective, I mean, in seeing the land use conflicts, let's use the temporary use permit that the port had applied for that was rejected. It's a perfect example where I think we want to keep industrial use as far away from residential use as reasonably possible, considering the fact that we're wedged on an island between a mountain and the ocean. So to me, the rationale why I was a big supporter of this is we want to try to cluster our industrial uses around each other, particularly around the landfill, and other existing long-standing heavy industrial uses. So I'm wondering what your guys' recommendation would be on how we might be able to address some of those requests for additional information, because to your point, with no specific projects being proposed, maybe it really just needs to go back to the planning principle of trying to keep industrial areas separate from residential and commercial to reduce those land use conflicts. That's the way that I'm rationalizing it and approaching it. Maybe I'd open that up to the rest of the council, how you guys see that, because I see that mixed bag of responses being more a request for information and less an opposition to clustering industrial activity outside of our main urban area.
Councillor Adie.
Yeah, I think that Mr. Buchan's pointing out that there are no projects and therefore no information really is the issue. And I would suspect that the discussion becomes much more specific and vibrant when somebody comes along and says, I'd like to use this piece of land for this. And then people can start to debate that. But then I guess that raises the question, if we've done the zoning and made the land from a zoning perspective available for those purposes, do we then remove the should we or shouldn't we discussion from any particular enterprise that comes in?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Just to respond to that, to a large degree, the question of should you or shouldn't you is answered with the adoption of the bylaw. Our take on the changes to the industrial is not entirely, but largely it was more fine tuning, especially when we're out in the area towards Ridley Island. We're not making really dramatic changes, especially not near a residential neighborhood. How we can deal with this going forward, and I think would be some explanation at the time of the public hearing as to what we're attempting to do. In that, we have to give some overview statements at the public hearing. I'm not getting the sense that there was any opposition to this. It was more query about information. I'm not sure putting anything on the project website would actually reach the folks that ask those questions. So I think our best bet moving forward is to be prepared with the kinds of rationale that Councillor Moreau was suggesting, and the information that we do have at hand when we get to that stage, if in fact there are any questions. The point was made that sort of contrary, but not really, points was made that there's not a lot of participation, but there was a lot. In terms of zoning bylaw reviews, this is the most I've ever seen in terms of public engagement or review of a zoning bylaw. Honestly, it doesn't capture people's imagination unless we're changing something in their backyard that is a particular issue. And that's why we put out that information. And I think that our overall response was really quite positive.
Okay, I have a question here too. Moving forward on like panel 11, which was the focusing commercial use in the city center. I'll use this line for you, Mr. Moreau. On paper, the discussion was about moving, main commercial uses to downtown. But during our development incentives, this came up where, there is existing properties, and we came up with a solution for that. But my question to you is with shifting the downtown or the commercial use on Park Avenue to more of a residential use, what would happen to any current plans that have been started in a process before these changes? So as an example, we have a project that's kind of in the middle of it was in a parking variance at one point and it was pulled, but it's still a process moving forward on a piece of commercial land that is zoned commercial. My question is where do we go with that if the changes were to be made in the bylaw? Because I'm we started a process with a proponent with a zoning, and that person has purchased property with a current zoning, and now we're in the process of possibly changing that zoning, and to me, this is it's less of a commercial building and more of I guess it's called a traveler's accommodation, and so I struggle with if we change this that a project may not be able to move forward, and in my eyes housing is and I'm pretty sure everyone on council can agree that housing is a high priority for us. I think that at this point in time, we are lacking housing in all levels of housing, whether that be someone building a duplex or a apartment building or, townhouses, single houses, and such projects as maybe a traveler's accommodation, which, would you consider that more of a residential? I mean, it's housing. It's not as much commercial as in the sense that there wouldn't be retail spaces in it. And so I'm struggling with having rezone all of the commercial properties on Park Avenue when the reality is that some of these properties could be under current zoning, could be housing in a way. And when I say housing in a way, anytime that we are able to supply housing through whether it's a traveler's accommodation or a short-term rental, all that's doing is taking strains and pressures off of other levels of housing. And so I guess maybe if you can answer my question as far as that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly this is a significant matter for property owners as well as for the community. when we came to you back in December, we actually said that we were discussing a potential commercial development on the lands west of the city core, the area that we spoke about, and we gave you maps at the time. And in looking at that commercial development, which is the one that I think you're referring to, we noted that there was a significant amount of C3 zone property in that area, and we noted that council's Vision 2030 document really spoke to the need to focus commercial development in the downtown and the Marina District, and even less so in the Midtown. So there's a real focused community goal articulated in the Vision 2030 of trying to focus and concentrate commercial development particularly in those two areas, and at the same time increasing residential, and residential in the sense of basically being permanent places for families and professionals to live, as opposed to travelers accommodation, which is more transient. That's not the same kind of residential that makes for strong neighborhoods and strong community. So I would differentiate, as the zoning bylaw does, residential, multifamily, or single family from basically travelers accommodation, which is by nature transient and commercial, because they're charged on a nightly basis. So we discussed that with council at the time, and the rationale and from Vision 2030, and received direction to change the draft OCP and zoning bylaw to take those areas that we've just referenced west of the city core, to move them into multifamily, which is necessary, and we thought some of it actually would be better off as parkland given its use. So the direction there was really multi-pronged. And the nature of travelers accommodation, I could see that particular site that you're talking about, being economically viable, but is it the right place for the community to have another hotel kind of use rather than downtown? And this particular one, the applicant that we've been speaking with, who made the variance but has redone this plan so he doesn't need the variance now, is contemplated some clientele, which would be, we're told, students, we're told, as well as workers that would fly in and fly out. So is that the kind of residential that you want? Is that building for the community, that less permanent variety of living space? So that's the rationale for that direction. Now it is absolutely council's discretion and prerogative as to the form and functionality of the parts of the community, as we, that's what the planning process is about. And council can confirm that direction now, or make an adjustment. What happens to people that have the property that's currently zoned C3? When we spoke with the person that had the development variance permit, and that report, of course, was pulled, as you mentioned, a couple months ago, early on, we said, the council is doing this process right now. So we were completely transparent with the applicant, and the applicant said, well, I'd like to keep the C3 zone. How do I get a decision? I said, well, a development variance permit is perhaps a cheaper way of getting a decision from council, but council under the Local Government Act has the ability to decide, even for a project in process, whether or not the application can proceed. The council can by resolution withhold a building permit and let a current bylaw process unfold, and the consequence of that, then sets what the applicant can do. So council can make a decision on this now, or let it carry on as it's currently underway.
Okay, well, I'm just going to rebut that before I take any other questions here. I mean, when I talk about housing, I think there's a need at every level, and whether it's a travelers accommodations, if you can get in order to achieve the 2030 goal of housing and a place for people to be, we need to have people move to this town. There's jobs that are out there that are being offered to people, and they can't come here because there's nowhere for them to live. And you know, if they're offered a higher paying job, and they're able to come here, they're potentially displacing other families because they're willing to pay a higher cost to rent a place. And so when I see housing options, I see a traveler's accommodation as a housing option and not so much as a commercial business. You know, but that's what's needed for that zoning. I don't see that as a commercial business as far as what we're trying to center in downtown. In downtown, we're trying to, you know, get those retail businesses and try and condense them. But I don't think this fits that. And I'm concerned that you know, we have a potential applicant that wants to build something that is going to serve a purpose. And I can go back, you know, back to high school and think of a situation where a friend he had moved to town, and he, being a young guy, you know, not living with his parents, living on his own, and trying to finish grade 12, and he needed a place to live, and he couldn't afford a lot. And what he could afford was a shared accommodation, and he was in a place that people shared the kitchens, and they shared the bathrooms, and they shared, and I see right now we have a very, very big population of immigrants that are moving to town here and working, you know, one, if not more than one job, and struggling to have a place to stay because they can't afford a place on their own. They're new to the country. And I think that although myself, I wouldn't want to live in a place where I have to share a kitchen with someone, I do feel that there is, at every level of housing, there is a need. And I think that a traveler's accommodation is just one more level of housing that will ease the pain. And whether that means a carpenter's living in there because he's in town to help build some of the new housing that we want downtown, or if it's a nurse that's in town for 6 months for a you know, a short-term job, or if it's, you know, anybody that's trying to get here. I think if we want to see 2030 come to you know, fruition, I think we need to have all levels of housing, and I think a traveler's accommodation is not a bad thing. It's just going to relieve pressure off other housing. And so my concern is that we pass this zoning bylaws and it eliminates someone's current zoning, which allows them to build something that we're already currently working on. And I don't want to be a closed for business council, and I don't want to be turning down housing. And so I have an issue with this particular change, and it's not that I have a problem changing it to a residential area, but I see that traveler's accommodation as more of a residential thing than I do see it as a commercial application. It's just right now that property is zoned commercial. So I will let other people speak about that. Councilor Moreau, go ahead.
I would just preface this statement by saying I don't necessarily disagree with anything that you just said, but I just want to get clear from the Buckins here. From my understanding, whether or not that specific property is zoned residential or commercial at this current time, we're still going to have the chance to debate it on its merits when it comes back to council's table, because at least from my perspective, the OCP is, if it goes to public hearing, we're going to be getting their application back on our table for that, would we not?
Not necessarily. I mean, if council is of one mind on this now, I think or majority mind on this now, they should make a decision on this. If the bylaw goes forward the bylaws, the OCP and the zoning go forward as they're currently written, the micro hotel would not be a permitted use on that site. Now, they could get a building permit, apply for a building permit before the bylaws adopted, and with that building permit, they would be able to secure their ability to build and develop that land. That could be brought back to council for a decision whether or not to withhold the building permit. Council would have a decision point at that point whether or not to allow it to proceed. But failing a decision now, and failing a decision on a building permit, the decision would be that they wouldn't be allowed to proceed.
So can I just ask a supplemental there, Mr. Chair? Is that okay?
Yes, go ahead.
So maybe it's a supplemental statement. It's not necessarily a question, actually. So, again, I don't disagree with anything that you just said. I think there is this kind of interesting gray area and a debate to be had around student and worker housing versus a micro hotel nightly charge. Because if you're a student, you're here likely a minimum of 4 months. If you are here as someone working, you might be on a 3-week on, 1 week off type of shift. I don't necessarily see that being completely incompatible with the surrounding land uses in that particular location. But I would much rather have that debate when that applicant comes for consideration. I don't think we should be holding up a wholesale community-wide zoning bylaw for the sake of one pending application, because I think you'll actually find I think the majority of us will agree with everything that you just said. We're willing to have that debate around student and worker housing, this gray area between residential and commercial zoning. But I think on the whole, we all agree, as was evidenced, when I say we all, I mean the community at large, from Vision 2030, of the critical importance of shrinking the size of our downtown, of clustering commercial activity in one area. And so I don't think we should be holding up our public hearing for the zoning bylaw on account of one pending application, because in the worst case scenario, if they don't file their building permits in time, if their application doesn't come back to council's table in the time that it takes us to go do the public hearing and get public engagement, then they can still come to us and apply for rezoning if they require it. But the other debate I think we'd be wanting to have on that specific project is, to me, I've already gotten conflicting information on that specific project. So I really don't want to have the debate about that specific project here when I don't have the ability or all the information at hand, because if it is a micro hotel and it is nightly accommodation, that's a very different discussion than student and worker housing, where people are being charged on monthly, quarterly or an annual basis. So with all that said, I'd still like to, I don't know if we have a motion on the table, but I would want to move the motion to proceed with the zoning bylaw. With the public hearings.
So now, are you seconding that, Mr. Ady, or are you asking a question? Because I know you had your hand up before that.
I'm happy to second it, but I do want to make a point of order, and it's an oversight. I noticed that there was a Section 5F report from the Director of Operations regarding the FCM grant that we kind of skipped over, and I'm pretty sure
I'm aware of that. We're going back to that.
Okay.
Yeah,
But I'm happy
I
to
missed.
I'm happy
I
to
missed
second.
that one.
I'm happy to second Councillor Moreau's motion.
Okay, Councillor Cunningham.
I tend to agree with Councillor Neese in this matter because one, you've got a person that's investing in the community, bought the property for a specific use, and we're going to cut that out from under him. And I think that he's looking at coming back to council, revising his plans, from what I understand. I haven't talked to him personally, but I've got that from somebody else. And, there's a great need for student housing and people with low-paying jobs. I know of one apartment. It's a 1-bedroom apartment. 3 students are living in it because they can't find anything else that they can afford. And I've come across other situations like that too. And there's a real need for something like this. It's not just a traveler's lodge type, fly in, fly out type thing. I think that, whether 120 might be too many, but I know damn well that, we do need this type of accommodation in this town. We've lost so many, the Inlander, Elizabeth Apartments, the Savoy, a lot of these places where people used to live. Right now we're down to probably just the Ocean View and a couple of small apartments that are cheap rent. And even them are starting to go up. And we need cheaper accommodation, whether it's shared or not. It's irrelevant. These people are going to move into this place. And I really think that cutting the legs out from underneath a person that's, a Rupert person that bought the property to invest in with an idea for this, I don't think we should be rezoning that particular piece of property until we find out for sure what's going to happen.
I'll add a little bit more to that too. I don't know what the best way to approach this is. I mean, I guess, it kind of sounds like most people are interested to have the debate about this project in the future. Is it possible that we could, because this is a project that's already on the books or has been started, is it possible that we change this RM2 zoning on all, on just like proposed, other than leaving it on that property until they decide on their project, or we give them more of a time limit? Or we can adjust or amend the bylaws after, if this project doesn't go through, then we could re-amend the bylaws to make that change to make it the RM2 housing. I'm of the same thoughts as far as not wanting to, we started a process with someone and we started working with a proponent, and I don't feel that it's right to all of a sudden change direction on someone who's invested time and a lot of money. And when I say a lot of money, it's a fairly expensive commercial piece of property that they invested in as a commercial piece of property with this application in mind, not something that they've been sitting on for a period of time. This is something that they have just currently done. So,
excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we're clearly beyond a public discussion about policy. We're now talking about things which have legal ramifications for the corporation. If this is a discussion the council wants to have, you need to have it in camera, because you're now affecting individuals. As you just talk about, we've gone through a very extensive process. We're at the, or close to the end of that process to go to a public hearing, et cetera, if you don't want to do that. But to not do that because of an application which is not before you at this time, based on a bunch of information that you're gathering from the community, and that may or may not affect somebody's rights, property rights, is a subject for an in-camera discussion.
Okay. That being said, that's why I was just trying to find out the best way to deal with this process, because it's if we don't amend something tonight, then it affects someone, and if we do amend it, it affects someone. So I guess it sounds like, from what Mr. Buchan said, is if they apply for a building permit, then before this continues on, then that can solve the issue. So my question to you, Mr. Buchan, is when is it that that this would be proposed to come to final reading after public consultation? Like, what is the proposed timeline on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My best guess is that we're probably a month and a half away from it coming for final approval. We'd probably need 3 weeks to get ready for a public hearing. And then it has to go and get approved by the Ministry of Transportation. And you know, that can take some time as well, particularly because it's a significant bylaw. You know, so, you know, and council can actually say, you don't bring back for final for a month and a half. So, you know, I think that's a month and a half is plenty of time for an applicant to get a building permit in and seal the fate on that project. It would be a council discussion, whether or not to allow it to proceed.
Okay, well, that answers my question. I wasn't trying to turn this into a legal debate. I'm more just curious to know what the process is starting with, you know, with something that's already been started before we changing the zoning on it. We had this situation come up a few years ago where zoning got changed on a property, and the property owners, some of them made claim that they weren't aware of the changes, and so I just want to make sure that we don't fall into a situation like that again.
Mr. Chairman, please.
Yes.
Talk about specific applicants.
I'm not talking about a specific
application. It is. Well, you're implying a particular application or not an application. You can't mix these things because they will, based on what you've just said, that will affect someone's rights.
Well, of course it will. That's anytime we change zoning on someone's property, that's going to affect someone's rights. So anytime we go through, and we're going through this process right now, we're trying to you know, according to the vision of the people up until now, is saying that we want to change Park Avenue to a residential area, and that being said, according to the information that was just given to us, you know, there was a few respondents to that, and you know, 18 were support the proposed regulations, 6 were in opposition to proposed, and 8% wanted to see, oh, that's short-term rental, sorry, I'm on the wrong page here. Here it is. 16 people were in support of council's direction to focus commercial uses, and it's not that I'm opposed to the commercial uses. I'm thinking that there is maybe a gray area as far as what you would call a commercial use. That's kind of more what I'm trying to point out here. And then it says 5 people wanting to see the revitalization of downtown core, which we all know that. 3 people stated a support for rezoning of commercial lands on Park Avenue, and 1 person was in opposition to council's direction to the focus of commercial use in the downtown core. So there's obviously a varied opinion on it, and I think this will be a discussion for a later date. So
in an in-camera meeting, so just I agree with city manager that we should probably conclude. But I know Councillor Adie wanted to add.
Councillor Skelton Morvan, I'm speaking right now. All I'm saying is that the zoning, by changing the zoning on that whole strip, I'm not talking about a specific site. I'm speaking of this whole strip, which is what we're discussing tonight, right? I'm speaking of it as a general, changing it to a residential zoning. And so I think this is a discussion that we need to have, because that's what this is about. We are changing it to residential if we continue on the path that we're continuing on. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. We can change it all to residential. That's fine. I just wanted to know the process as far as where we were at. So I just want to confirm that. I'm not saying that I'm all for a particular project. I'm saying that I'm for housing. That's what I'm for, housing. Now, how housing looks, in what order it looks, that's to be determined by any time someone brings a project forward to us. Now, whether someone wants to bring a duplex, a fourplex, an apartment, a townhouse, every time, that's when the debate will happen on that particular project. And so moving forward, Mr. Adie, you have some questions?
No, just a comment. We have a motion on the floor, and in view of other business that we need to get to, I'm wondering whether we shouldn't move towards having a vote on it.
Councillor Leash, you actually have a motion on the floor prior to Councillor Moreau and Councillor Adey making the, presenting the motion, you had a motion on the floor moved by Councillor Moreau and seconded by Councillor Rendawa to proceed with the public hearing for the OCP and the zoning bylaw. So that is currently the motion on the floor.
Okay, so that being, is there any more discussion? Councillor Cunningham.
Well, if this has to be discussed in camera, why don't we just table this until the next meeting and have an in-camera meeting and get this straightened out once and for all?
No, that's not where we're going to take this. That's not what this is about. This, I'm not trying to talk about a specific project here. This is talking about rezoning of a whole area. And that's what we're here to talk about. It's rezoning of the whole area. And that's part of our bylaw discussion. It's not about that particular project. We can talk about that particular project if it comes forward again. That's when we can discuss that project. It's not about discussing that particular project now. It's more about the rezoning of the land. So if there's no further questions, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous. Okay, now sorry, we'll go back one spot because I actually missed 5F, which is report from the Director of Operations in regards to the FCM grant. Go ahead, Mr. Pucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The recommendation is that Mayor and Council pass a resolution to support staff applying for the FCM Green Municipal Fund Grant application for innovative wastewater treatment. This is to minimize the impact on local taxpayers. The Operations Department proposes that the city apply for grant funding through the FCM to complete this pilot project for an innovative wastewater solution for our liquid waste. The Green Municipal Fund is out there for green and innovative capital projects. The city is researching the ability to treat our community's liquid waste through an organically based wetland system. The capital cost of this pilot project is between $2 and $3 million. This grant would contribute up to $500,000 towards that capital cost. The city would be responsible for the remainder. However, this department and myself are actively looking for other grants and other sources, opportunities to fund the remaining portion. In conclusion, faced with the need to develop liquid waste treatment for the community, the city will significantly benefit from this grant to explore green and innovative options. Thank you.
So the motion is that the mayor and council pass a resolution to support staff applying for the following grant application, the FCM grant application, Innovative Wastewater Solutions. Do I have a mover? Okay, Councillor Cunningham and Councillor Adey. Mover and seconder. Is there any other questions? Councillor Adey.
And just a question about the roughly $2.5 million that the city is, you partly answered it by saying that you're going to go after other grants and what have you. What would be our position if you were unsuccessful in finding support? Would this still then be a cost-effective way for us to use that money?
Yes, I believe so, Councillor. We have a surplus in sewer right now. We would also look to other grant funds. There's the UBCM, there's the province of British Columbia, who is very interested in helping fund this program as well. As council is aware, the numbers are quite staggering for sewer treatment for our community through classic treatment, which is large concrete vessels, tertiary treatment and all that. This system looks at organically based wetland, which we do have a lot of that in our community through activated treatment. And so we believe that this is a favorable option that could save a significant amount of money for the community and be innovative and green and sustainable. So we would look to go to any sustainable and green grant with the province, with the UBCM and with the federal government to try and fund the maximization of what we could.
And I'll just follow up by saying I'm very much in favor of this. I think it's a very forward-thinking, very green, a very progressive thing for us to be going after, and I really hope it works out.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions? Councillor Cunningham?
I echo Councillor Ady's thoughts on this. But one question, has anyone else tried this system yet? Because it seems to be cutting edge, and I just love the idea that we're going to be front and center on it. And I appreciate staff going and looking, researching this and that, because it's we've been struggling with this problem for quite a while, and just tearing up all the infrastructure to get at our sewer pipes and everything was going to be something. And if this works, it's going to be fantastic. But I just wondered, is this actually in place anywhere else, Mr. Pucci?
Yes, this type of technology is used in northern and remote regions where they don't have discharge areas, but they can have areas for wetlands. So what it does is it goes through biological treatment, and that's all subsurface before it makes its way to surface water, and all the treatment is completed before the water becomes actually on the surface. It's quite innovative. It's in practice in remote northern communities above the 22nd parallel. It's actually an accepted practice in those areas by the federal government. What we're trying to do is adapt that to coastal applications, as we think that the way our ground conditions are favorable for this type of application and our naturally wet climate.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm quite impressed with the research you've done on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Skelton Morgan.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank and acknowledge staff for the forward-thinking approach, and also acknowledge Dr. Long as well, where the initial conversations of this project started when he and I took our trip to the FCM convention and started these initial conversations. And I think that going this direction is definitely, especially if we can successfully pull this off, it's drastic reduction in costs of what would have been a $200 million wastewater treatment facility. If we can go a route and utilize our natural muskeg, and no shortage of muskeg here in Prince Rupert, so I know that if there's a way to work around this and utilize some of the land that would be more complex to develop or impossible to develop and not feasible, I think if we can utilize that in a green and sustainable way, it's phenomenal. And I just want to also acknowledge Mr. Pucci for his research and his diligence on this project. So thanks, and a huge kudos to staff.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Yes, absolutely. The FCM has supported this from the get-go. So we've done a feasibility study. As Council will know, you approved that project. So we've moved now from a feasibility study, and we're getting priority onto actually completing a pilot project with the FCM that they're supporting. So we're extremely happy to move this forward. Thank you.
Any Councillor Moreau?
If I can just first agree with everything Councillor Skelton Morgan said, I just want to add, normally grant applications are quite easy for council to vote in favor of, because they save us some money towards a project that we were wanting to do anyways. But Mr. Pucci's made this even easier for us, where it's a grant proposal that will save us in the factor of potentially tens of millions of dollars on a very innovative solution to a very complex problem. It's environmentally restorative. It turns one of our biggest liabilities into an asset, which I think, based on our experience in Watson Island, it is possible. Even though it's ambitious and optimistic, and even sometimes when other people haven't done it before, I think if we're going to be a model for others and take a little bit of a risk here, this is the way to do it in a way that's very considerate of our local ecosystem, and solves what could be one of the most expensive mandated projects that we have to accomplish here on a time frame from the federal government. So again, I would say grants are a very easy thing to vote in favor of, but you've made this incredibly easy for all of those reasons I just listed. So thank you very much for your hard work on this file.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Did we get a mover and seconder on this one already? I think we did, yes. Okay, so since there's no more questions, is this anyone opposed or for the project? So, sorry, let me clarify that. I'm so confused because of the usual phone call meetings we've been having and saying opposed. So let's start that one again. So who is for this project or for this application? Okay. That being said, there's no one opposed. Thank you, Mr. Pucci.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so lastly, number 7, reports, questions, and inquiries from members of council. Councillor 80.
Yeah, I just want to jump in there and say what probably several people are wanting to say. Very much top of mind this week, the marvelous job that was done down at the Civic Center with the vaccinations. I know that the community as a whole participated massively in this. And I think the first point of congratulation needs to go to the community itself for the strength of the volunteer effort, but also to the various officials and levels of government that participated in making it happen. And I know just the final couple of points on that. I'm looking forward to hearing in as specific detail as the health authorities are likely to give us what our numbers look like in 3 or 4 weeks compared to what they looked like in the past month. Hopefully all a positive trend. And second, just a reminder that it's a vaccination. It does not prevent transmission, and that we need to continue to be vigilant until the broader problem resolves itself, and we can say that it's behind us. Secondly, just congratulations to the absent mayor on the birth of his first child and his partner Haley. Brilliant news, and I know from personal experience what an important occasion that is. So congratulations to him.
Councillor Rendawa.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, as Councillor Eddie already said, I would like to thank all the frontline workers, staff, city staff, all the volunteers, everybody involved on the vaccination. And I would like to ask Northern Health to give a second dose to all our frontline workers, because there's no evidence that you have to wait for 4 months. Like other communities like Terrace and First Nation communities, they're already getting second dose for their frontline workers. So I think if we can get our frontline workers second dose, that would be help preventing the COVID and keep our frontline workers safe and also our community safe. And if our Councillor Cunningham can bring up in his next meeting, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, I'll follow on that same note. I'd like to thank Northern Health and particularly Julie Pemberton for organizing the vaccines last week. She did it at very short notice. Northern Health stepped up to the plate and brought in a lot of personnel. The community as a whole was fantastic. I volunteered on 3 different days, and I couldn't believe the atmosphere down there and how efficiently it was run. And I just found out a couple of hours ago that our numbers are between 7,700 and 8,000 that were vaccinated this week. And the numbers for today aren't in, so there's a discrepancy, but it was approximately 7,700 people as of last night. So they more than achieved the percentage they wanted to. And also I'd like to point out that I'd like to thank the city and the staff for donating the Civic Center to this. As it was pointed out to us, Northern Health was willing to pay for it, and the city said, no, this is our contribution to it. And it was a great gesture because other communities are actually not doing that, so yet anyway, so we might lead the way on that. And also it was so successful, they're looking at it as a model for other communities that have, that type of situation where they're going to vaccinate the whole community. And a second thing, getting away from complimenting and slapping everyone on the back, I was phoned today about a group that wanted to bring in a petition for the committee of the whole, and they were told there was already one delegation, and I wondered if Rosa or Dr. Long could enlighten me if we are limited to just one delegation or not for the committee of the whole on that particular thing, because it was a fairly important petition and delegation. They wanted to speak on a very controversial project. So could I get Rose or Dr. Long to speak on that?
Yes, I can certainly speak to that. I have received the information. According to the bylaw, we can have up to 3 depending on the agenda and what that might look like. I have spoken with the mayor and Dr. Long, and will be reaching out to this individual to ensure that they do have an opportunity to speak with council. So it's not that they're not permitted, it's just that we need to ensure that we have sufficient time for them to present their information.
Could we possibly, instead of waiting a month for the next committee of the whole, have them on the agenda for the next regular meeting as a delegation?
I can certainly make note of that and get back to you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Skelton-Morin.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo a lot of those notions and really acknowledge Northern Health, their frontline staff, the First Nations Health Authority, as well as all the volunteers that mobilized really quickly, and also that this now is like mentioned before. This can be a model now for other communities that will be going through these community vaccination processes. Another thing, though, is it also just kind of echoes some of what Councillor Adie said, just that we still have to remain vigilant with our cases still surging at this time. There has been there's a lot of community members, and some as young as 19 years old now fighting for their lives. This is something that I don't think is being covered enough, unfortunately, by the media. And I think that the word needs to get out there. And for me, as someone who's been continuously banging this drum, I think that there's some responsibility for these media outlets to now start speaking about this topic and making folks aware. I know that this has been going on for quite some time now. We've been under lockdown, and unfortunately at times, especially during the holidays, folks allowed for a little bit of complacency, and this struck us when we weren't looking. And I'm finding that this topic isn't being talked about enough. I'm hoping that the media will start to pick up a little bit of what's happening here and make it a little bit more transparent. And the intention is not to ensue panic, but is to ensue a lot of caution and vigilance. And we need to really express that now. And I think that's super, super important, really emphasize what is actually taking place versus, despite the good news and all of the things happening now with vaccination, that still does not make us completely immune to the process and what we're experiencing right now. And that these numbers, and it's everyone now knows somebody that's hasn't been involved in being affected with COVID. And I think, again, to really express that this is not a drill. We're experiencing this real. It's happening right on our doorstep. We're now become kind of the epicenter of what Northern BC is experiencing, and I really want folks to take this seriously. And that the media really needs to start to do their part in the coverage of what is actually taking place. And maybe even to highlighting some of the stories of family members and ones that have just lost. Like we've lost a resident that I believe was 30 years old. And a lot of folks seem to have written this off as a virus that is taking seniors and those that are immune compromised. There are people that are in good health that are fighting for their lives right now, which really prompts a layer of caution. So I just, again, those at home that are struggling right now, I know this isn't easy. Seek out those supports to help you cope with some of the grief and the stresses that you're experiencing. And I hope that the messaging can get out there and that some will join the effort as well.
Oh, Councillor Moreau.
I think I'm the only one that didn't speak, so I won't repeat what any of my council colleagues have said, but I do just want to add just a couple of notes to kind of try to split the difference on just the overwhelmingly positive reaction of this vaccination clinic. With approximately 9,000 people over the age of 18 in Prince Rupert, if we're approaching anywhere close to 8,000, as Councillor Cunningham has said, then we're well above what is generally accepted to be the threshold for herd immunity of 70% is kind of what a lot of experts have agreed is the bare minimum. So that to me is something worth celebrating, but I don't think we can forget, to Councillor Scott Morven's point, this is bittersweet. The only reason that we have been prioritized is because we've lost 16 of our loved ones, because dozens of our healthcare staff on the front lines have tested positive, because we don't have enough acute care beds to actually handle the number of cases that are coming to our one regional hospital. And you know, I've been doing a lot of media just the last week to try to basically tell Prince Rupert's story a little better. And you know, one thing that really hit home, I think, was that if you're in the Lower Mainland, if you're in Vancouver, or you're on Vancouver Island in Victoria or Nanaimo, within 150 kilometers, you have access to more hospitals than we have access to hospital beds. The level of capacity in rural and remote areas is so starkly different than the Lower Mainland. So I really do want to celebrate the amazing mobilization, the fact that the community responded in spades, that we had over 400 volunteers put their names forward to help out just within the first 16 hours of this announcement, that this thing was pulled together in basically less than a week. It's all astounding, but I think that it is tempered by that incredibly bittersweet reality. So with all that said, yeah, I turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair, to wrap up.
Okay, well, I think everyone's had their piece to say except for myself. Congratulations to our mayor also on Olivia being born. And now it's time for you. You think being the mayor is hard? Welcome to parenthood, buddy. And that being said, it's time to anyone want to make a motion for adjournment? Councillor Adey, Councillor Cunningham, all those in favor? Any opposed? Good night, everyone.